Hey everybody out there, it's Pastor John with your Midweek Reflection. We're continuing. This is going to be our last new prayer practice and prayer message this week in our The Living God series, where we've been exploring what it means to pray in the presence of the living God and in the reality of the risen Christ. How do we connect with God? What is prayer? And last week we talked about unanswered prayers. And it's not something we often talk about. We tend to highlight, of course, the testimonies of answered prayer, and we say, "Oh, God has been blessed me and been so gracious." But I think we've all had experiences where we've prayed and prayed and prayed, and just hasn't come to pass. So what do we do with those? And I said that I really believe from experience and from the scriptures, we looked at a few examples of how unanswered prayers can go unanswered for a number of reasons. We talked about maybe it's because of sin, that God wants to show you something about your life, and so to get you to stop and listen, He might not give you what you ask for. It might be, but it also might be because God is developing character in your life, or God is unlocking a greater purpose in the world, as we saw with Jesus. So, all in all, unanswered prayer is meant to invite us deeper into the mystery of God and into the mystery of God's purposes for your life and for the world. And so it's important for us to pay attention to those unanswered prayers and step through the door and say, "God, what's going on here? What are you doing here? Why aren't you answering my prayer?" And to continue to engage with God through all of that. This week is Pentecost. It's one of the most important church holidays. I think, if I remember correctly, it goes back before Christians were really celebrating Christmas. They were celebrating Pentecost, which takes us to the beginning of the church's story, where Jesus' story transitions into the story of the church. And this week we're going to be looking at corporate prayer, or prayer in community, prayer as the church. And one of the texts that always comes up when I talk about praying with people is Matthew 6, where Jesus says, when you pray, lock yourself in your closet. Don't do it on the street corners for everyone to see. Lock yourself in the closet. And sometimes people say, well, you're only really supposed to pray by yourself privately. It's supposed to be a very personal, private thing. And while it's important to distinguish personal and private. Those are two really different things. Prayer is supposed to be personal, but not necessarily private. I think Jesus is saying something else, that we're not praying for show. We're not praying to impress people. We're not praying for the sake of other people and how they view us. And if we're doing that, then we really should lock ourselves in our closet and pray where no one else can see us. But we have examples in the scriptures over and over of God's people gathering for prayer, even God commanding His people to come together. If you look at Joel 2, which is one of the texts that Peter cites on Pentecost, we have God calling the people to come together and pray. And that's what we see in the early church as well. So, one of the things to think about is what is the value of praying together? What's the value of coming together as the church to pray? And maybe that's not something you've done or experienced, but what might be the value of that practice of praying as a community, praying together, joining our voices together in petition and in praise and adoration and confession. Why do we do that together? And in fact, we do that every Sunday. We pray together as a church. And this week, I should say that we are having a guest speaker, someone who has been trained at the International House of Prayer in Kansas, and his name is Trevor. He's called an intercessory prayer missionary. He's going to come and help us reflect on this text in Acts 2, the Pentecost story, and help us guide us in some prayer practices as a community. So I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you are too. It'll be a great celebration. As always, I look forward to worshiping with you as we live the gospel life together. And until then, may God bless you.